Welcome to the Scott and Holman podcast. This is the first Scott and Holman podcast episode taking place in the college basketball regular season proper, which is now underway. We're very excited about that. Very excited to be talking Cougar men's hoops in their opener. Cougar women's hoops about to get underway this weekend. Certainly thrilled to be talking about all that, talking Cougar football as well, Cougar volleyball continuing their strong season. You may notice I'm not the one that usually does these intros. Sam is not with us for this episode this evening because frankly, the gravity of entering a college basketball season without his favorite coach of all time, Jim Boeheim, patrolling the sidelines has just been emotionally overwhelming for him. So he didn't feel like he could go tonight, but fear not, Bobby and I are here to talk all the latest and greatest Cougar sports. Bobby, how you feeling this evening?
I'm good, man. I was supposed to get a root canal earlier today, but the dentist, when we got there, was like, "Yeah, you don't actually need one." So
Nice.
I'm great. I'm doing way better than I thought I would be at 7 o'clock tonight. So yeah, ready to talk some Cougar sports without pain in my mouth.
I say anytime you wake up expecting to get a root canal and then end up not getting a root canal, it's hard to have your day ruined after that. I mean, it sounds like I'd be walking on air. So props to you. You know what else is going to make you feel fantastic as not getting a root canal? That is supporting our friends at Charlie Hustle. Going to charliehustle.com and getting yourself some fantastic merch there. I've mentioned before on the one time when I actually did one of these Charlie Hustle promos before, aside from Sam usually taking these, is just, everyone I know that has seen these shirts, has worn these shirts, people that are not being sponsored by charliehustle.com, constantly remarking on how comfortable they are, how good they look. So if you want to get some college sports shirts, whether that's for U of H, whether that's for another school, for yourself, or for a loved one who may have made the tragic mistake to go to a school, not the University of Houston, you can find all of those shirts, all those schools at charliehustle.com. And if you use promo code SHP15, as in Scott and Holman Podcast 15, you will get a 15% discount at checkout. So we would love for you to get yourself some sweet merch and support the Scott and Holman Podcast at once. Speaking of that, you can also support us by supporting our friends, the 1012 Network. We are proud members of the 1012 Network, bringing you collectively all the latest and greatest Big 12 sports. I don't know if Sam wanted me to mention this, but heck with it. He's not here to stop me. So I'm just going to throw it out there. You may have noticed recently, Sam, the new host of Midwest Madness, a podcast in the 1012 Network talking Big 12 basketball all year round. So I think he's already had an episode or two of that. Be sure to give that a listen. Midwest Madness. Be sure to give our friends 1012 Network a subscription to their pod. Follow them on the socials, all that good stuff for all the latest and greatest, because I know a lot of us are not just excited about the University of Houston, but are excited about the Big 12 conference in general. So the 1012 Network definitely going to be your best way to stay up to date on all of that. Let's go ahead and jump right in with it. And I think the first thing we got to mention right away is jumping in with some Cougar football and the game that they played this weekend that Bobby and I were fortunate enough to attend together up in Waco, Texas. And that was a dramatic last-second overtime win over the Baylor Bears. And yeah, I mean, this season hasn't been the most, the greatest, I think, since any of us have been Cougar fans, but you can't say that it hasn't had a couple of pretty dramatic, exciting damn wins in Big 12 play. First, the walk-off, the Hail Mary versus West Virginia. Now, the walk-off 2-point conversion in overtime as Houston beats the Baylor Bears. I won't do the full drive-by-drive recap that Sam usually does, because this game, let's be honest, absolutely does not deserve that.
Does not deserve it.
But we'll do a brief recap anyway. The first half in particular was UGLY. It had no alibi. It was ugly. The lone shining star was midway through the second quarter when Baylor decided to go for it on 4th and 6 from the Houston 43-yard line. Traylon Payne came up with a huge sack of Blake Shapen back in Baylor territory. Houston was capitalized on the field position. Donovan Smith completing 3 straight passes, the third being a 26-yard touchdown pass to Sammy Brown that took Houston into halftime with a 7-0 lead. Midway through the third quarter, Jack Martin hits the field goal to punch it to 10-0, but it got kind of scary after that because the Cougar defense, up to this point pitching a shutout, had kind of felt like maybe it needed a little luck to be doing that, and all of a sudden the luck ran out and everything kind of started breaking the other way, and Baylor looked increasingly capable of marching down the field and scoring points, which they did. A couple of scoring drives made it 10-10. But the Cougar offense responded with its best offensive drive since one of the ones in the UT Austin game for sure. 75 yards, I should say, in 5 plays to retake a 17-10 lead. And then on Baylor's ensuing possession, Malik Robinson picked off Shapen on the first play of the drive, giving Houston the ball on the 40-yard line. in Baylor territory with a 7-point lead with 5:24 left. That should have been the game. It was not. Houston managed to gain just 14 yards. Jack Martin misses the 44-yard field goal, making him now 3 of 9 on the year from 40 plus. Baylor gets the ball, marches down the field, scores with seconds left to send the game to overtime. Bears also got the ball first in overtime, promptly scored easily once again. And then to make things even more fun, Houston got called for leaping on the extra point attempt, which was applied to Houston's offensive possession in overtime, which got to start at the 40-yard line. But Donovan Smith moved the ball down the field, scores the touchdown, then, of course, the 2-point conversion that you've probably all seen by now. Houston coming out in the bunch formation, having all 5 receivers spread out wide. And then, Bobby, you and I were there. And as soon as that happened, and Baylor all of a sudden has no linebacker behind the line, we both went to each other and just like in unison, we're like, quarterback sneak. And the thing that made me think of kind of immediately and throughout the week is the 2009 Texas Tech game.
Yep.
Case Keenum scoring that winning touchdown in the closing seconds with the exact same 5 wide situation from about the 2-yard line, and then punching it on the QB keeper. So love seeing it. Bobby, certainly was dramatic. Maybe not, like I said, the prettiest game ever, but I don't know, what were some of your takeaways from this one?
Yeah, the thing I really wanted to start with was the defense. I thought they played okay. Like in the, kind of looking at the stats, Shapen going 29 of 37 for 263 felt like a lot. Like I didn't think that they threw the ball 37 times, but I also it never felt like he got 2 touchdowns and an interception. Like obviously he did, but it just never felt like he threw for 260 or 263 against us. But it felt like their offense ran for a lot more than 150. I know me and you were there, but we were texting Sam, and this Baylor run defense is run offense is averaging 100 yards a game, and they just felt like they ran the ball down our throats the entire game. Another guy for them that I was surprised when I looked at his stat line wasn't much bigger was Dawson Pendergrass. I mean, 9 carries for 50 yards. That is a pretty big line, but it felt like he had 15 carries and ran for 125. Like it just felt like he just absolutely owned us. So that was kind of my big takeaway was this defense looked okay. I think you were helped by some mistakes in the first half by Baylor, 2 missed field goals. Really takes you in and makes you 7-0 or 7-0 going into half is a lot different than 7-6. And right. We may say that's kind of what you do get credit for stopping those field goals and stopping those drives. But if I recall the first one where they had the 49-yard field goal that was blocked, where Baylor did, it really felt like they shot themselves in the foot going into that at the end of the drive. I couldn't find it, but it felt like they had some penalties or just a couple of bad plays, something along those lines. So this game felt it just, I don't know if it was just apathy kind of setting in, but like the defense didn't play as well as the stats might indicate they did. And the same with the offense, right? I know we were driving back to my parents' house and we were kind of looking at some of the stats, and you mentioned Donovan Smith, and I was just like, what was his percentage? What was his stat line? And you said 21 to 27 for 236, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. And I was like, it didn't feel like he only had 6 incomplete passes. So it really felt like the eye test and the statistical test felt really different in this game. What about you?
Yeah, I think the reason that 150 rushing yards felt like a lot more than that was because we knew coming in that they're averaging like 84 or something like that. When you play maybe the worst rushing offense on your schedule this side of Sam Houston this year, and maybe Rice, I guess, but and all of a sudden they're putting up $150 on you. It does. It feels like more because even though there were some stuffed runs as well, but every time they broke one for 6 or 7, you're like, damn, this team can't run on anybody. Yeah. How are they running on us? No, and I agree kind of with having like the mixed feelings on the defense, because I like there were some things to like for sure. Nelson Caesar had 3 sacks in this one. I thought Traylon Payne played really well, caused a lot of havoc, including the big sack to force the turnover on downs in the first half, like I mentioned there. So there was lots to like, but kind of like I said, all of a sudden when like midway through the third quarter, when Baylor all of a sudden started scoring points, and you realize, they had a shutout up until that point, and it didn't feel like you had a shutout, right? Because like they were moving the ball somewhat, like you said, they missed a couple of field goals, at least one they probably should have had, kind of were shooting themselves in the foot to kind of help you keep them off the board there. So Yeah, it's hard to, it's hard to get too picky with a defense. Like I said, did technically have a shutout going until, midway through the third quarter and only gave up 17 points in regulation, which even to a pretty mediocre offense like Baylor's is a perfectly respectable number, I think. But on the other hand, yeah, it's like, yeah, you needed some help to get there. And then all of a sudden when the game was coming down the stretch, you weren't getting the stops anymore. You probably needed Houston to go for 2 and get it in the overtime because that defense just did.
The defense looked gassed.
Looked like they had run out of stops that they were capable of getting against the Baylor offense. So, not the most encouraging, and kind of like you said, offensively as well. I thought it was similar where there was some things you could like. Donovan Smith, up and down performance from him, I think is a good way to put it. But you give him some credit. He did enough when he needed to. And then he waved goodbye to the Baylor students after scoring the winning
always great
conversion, which was excellent. So we do like that.
As long as you do it after the game's over.
Yes.
Unless you go to college at West Virginia.
Yeah, note to
and then you do it.
Wait until there's actually no time left.
That is correct. That is correct.
But then another big game from Sammy Brown, one of the guys you can just really say is having an out and out fantastic season. But again, it's just overall, was it just like an overwhelming on either side of the ball? I wouldn't say it was a game that like changed my opinion about the trajectory of the program, right? They didn't play well enough on either side of the ball that I go, okay, no, that was a really like positive data point that makes me feel like this offense or this defense are kind of moving in a real positive direction. And that's because we played an extremely ugly game against and barely beat, one of the worst teams in the conference. So, similar to what I said after the West Virginia game, it was still fun. I'll go back where it started. Like, it's fun to win. It's fun to win on the road. It's fun to beat Baylor. Don't let your overall thoughts on the program prevent you from enjoying awesome moments like the one that we got in overtime. Because that's, like I said, even if, I want some other coach. Okay. The point of hiring some other coaches is so that you can win games. So, we already got there. We won the game. We beat Baylor. Be happy about that. And I am. And I had fun. And I'm glad I went. I'm glad we went. And I'm glad the Cougars got the W. But, I think you can say that and you can also go, okay. But that being said, I can also take a step back and go, okay, no, this doesn't really make me feel a lot better about the short or long-term trajectory of the program.
Yeah, I think one of the big moments for me was Donovan Smith. I want to say it was the first interception where he threw it up and we both just kind of looked at each other and went, oh, and then he came down with it and we were like, yeah, that probably should have been on the back pylon back there. And it wasn't. And really both of his interceptions were kind of like that. The second one too, where he went downfield and he threw it inside when you should have kind of thrown that over the back shoulder to and make it where either it's going to be an incomplete pass or your guy can catch it. Those are little things that make a big difference, right? We talk about Baylor missing those 2 field goals, but Donovan Smith doesn't throw that interception at the 1 yard line and get it picked off by the safety. What does the game look like in that way, right? So those things kind of come out of the wash when you really kind of break it down, and that's kind of football. But I thought the offense was just kind of, you didn't, I didn't come away from this game thinking, oh my God, our run game looks so good. But then you look at it and you got 32 carries for 130. You're averaging 4.1 per carry. It felt, and then you kind of look at the long runs though, and you're like, oh, that's where most of the yards were. It was among those four runs those 4 rushes. You got 30, 44, 57 of your 137 comes on 4 runs. It's kind of, you kind of go, okay, it was kind of a big hit, home run or strikeout kind of deal with the run game. So let me ask you this. What did you think of the call to go for 2 there?
Oh, I mean, I think you had to do it. And I was, and you can attest because I was sitting right next to you and I said it multiple times during the overtime. I think before Baylor got the ball and before we got the ball, I was like, oh, I'm pretty sure I even said before they even got the ball, I said, they're going to score a touchdown. And then we're going to score a touchdown, go for 2 and win it. And then after they scored a touchdown, I said it again, I go, we're going to score a touchdown, go for 2 and win it. And I think you had to, because you didn't get the chance to do that against the Longhorns when you wanted to. And it's like, okay, this is at least giving you your chance to do the walk off against an in-state rival. And also because, like I said, you weren't getting any stops anymore. So that was not a game where I wanted it to keep going to another overtime. I wanted it to keep, I wanted it to keep, I was like, oh yeah, we'll get a stop in the second overtime when we have to go first offensively. And then our defense can match it. I felt no confidence in that whatsoever. So, I feel great. And it's a testament to the fact that, because I mean, like I said, we have when we have needed 1 or 2 or 3 yards this year, like we have not been consistently getting 1 or 2
No.
yards. So I didn't say, I wasn't thinking, we need to go for 2, because I'm like, I totally trust, the staff,
The play call.
which to be fair, like, that was a great play call. They were fantastic. Like, they did everything you could hope for. They put their players in a good situation to make a play there. So, credit to the staff for what they drew up there. But I wasn't certainly calling it because I felt wildly confident, but it just felt like it felt like you had to just go ahead and be like, all right, let's try and sneak out of here with the W. Yeah.
I think the thinking of doing it because your defense hasn't got to stop, I can totally see that point. Me personally, I'm probably kicking the field goal there. That's just me. That's not me second guessing him. He obviously made the right call. You win that game. I think if you have that play drawn up for the 2-point conversion, you can take it into the second overtime where you have to go for 2 there. So I wouldn't be roasting him either way if he doesn't go for 2 there. But one more big problem that I just wanted to talk about and touch on was this team's ability to get off the field on 3rd and long or 4th and long. We had a 4th. Was it 3rd or 4th and 18? Either way.
Yeah.
Shapen rolls out, picks it up with his feet. It's just, at some point we're going to have to make a stop on 3rd and long or 4th and long. Like, I don't understand how this coach that we're paying, this coordinator that we're paying all this money to, doesn't have the ability to stop somebody on 3rd. And when I say long, most of the time people think like 8 to 10, 8 to 12. No, we can't stop 3rd and very long. Yeah. 3rd, I'm at one point they had 2nd and quarter of the field. It was 2nd and 24, and we gave it up. I don't understand how or what is happening, but at some point you have to address it. And we're in 9 games now.
Yeah, we're 3/4 of the way in. It's a little bit late to suddenly be coming up with a miracle fix.
Yeah,
it's been
what are we doing
for sure? Yeah, the time has passed for that one. I guess I did want to say there was at least something you mentioned, and you did mention the run game, but I think it's important to talk about the run game more broadly. But I think it does kind of fit within the same, like, okay, am I going to complain about 4.1 yards per carry given this team on the year? No. Is that spectacular against a team that's allowing 5.1 yards per carry prior to this game coming in? No, it's not spectacular either. So it's kind of that same, okay, am I going to complain all day about this? No, it's not really. It's not getting me excited or getting my blood, going for the rest of the year either, though. The other thing I was going to say, the one sense in which Houston did actually show something in this game that they had not shown before that actually did give me some confidence for the future. They ran 2 or 3 tush pushes.
Yes. Oh my God.
We've been every fan has been
on the same drive too.
Yeah, they did it back-to-back drive.
Oh, it was beautiful.
It was amazing, and it worked. Turns out, yeah, if you got a 6'4", whatever, big strong quarterback like Donovan Smith, and now the tush push is legal, and it worked so well. It worked so well that I was simultaneously glad that they were doing it and glad to seeing it working, and glad to the thing that everyone kind of all the armchair, offensive coordinators were calling for was actually a smart thing to be calling for. And then also simultaneously mad, wait, why didn't we do this the first 8 games of the season when we had a bunch of these short yardage situations? We probably could have done this, but
you knew we were so surprised by it because the people who were with us, my family who doesn't watch U of H football, were like, why are they celebrating a basic 3rd and 1? And we're like, you guys have no idea what this means to us right now. So.
Yeah, I think that's my last thought. So I'm happy to end this one on a positive note, Bobby. Unless you got something else you want to bring up from this game.
I don't, buddy. Let's go ahead and move on.
All right, we love it. So Houston moving on with a 4-5 record, needs 2 wins from their final 3 to get to bowl eligibility, and certainly have what looks like a very winnable, I would say their most winnable game of the season coming up this Saturday when they'll be hosting the Cincinnati Bearcats. And a week ago when we were previewing the Baylor game, we discussed a team that, like Houston, was having a tough season and had a fan base that, like Houston's, was pretty over it with their head coach at this point. And I have to say, Cincinnati and Houston are not comparable in that regard because the Bearcats are having a much worse season than Houston, and they are even angrier at their head coach than we are. So that's where the analogy actually breaks down, believe it or not. After winning their season opener, dominating Eastern Kentucky, a solid FCS team, and then winning at Pitt, who people erroneously believed at the time was going to be a good team. The Bearcats were 2-0 in the Scott Satterfield era. Everyone was feeling pretty good. They have followed that up with 7 straight losses, including their last non-conference game to their rivals in Miami of Ohio, who they beaten like 16 straight games. Can't relate to losing to a local rival that you always beat. Then they lost all 6 of their Big 12 games, so they're still looking for that first Big 12 win. Their last 4 games are, respectively, a 20-point home loss to Iowa State, a home loss to awful Baylor, a 32-point road loss to Oklahoma State, and a home loss to previously winless in the Big 12, UCF. So, Bobby, not great. Is there anything that scares you about the Cincinnati team, or are you feeling relatively confident about a Cougar football game?
Here's what I'll tell you. Here's what scares me. Vegas has this -2 at home for us. What does Vegas know that we don't, right? Like, I'm not saying that like we're good enough to just go out and be like, oh yeah, we'll just beat somebody. Like, we're not that good, right?
Right.
But it's gonna be hard for me to really get scared by Emory Jones, right? It's tough for me to look at their offense and just go, oh yeah, this team's gonna put up, 500 yards and 42 points, and can our offense have the ability to strike back to them? We just played Baylor pretty close, and they only they lost by 3 to Baylor. We beat them by a couple. That was at their place, our place. You see the UCF game, and UCF, I think, is better than their record indicates, and some of the other things they've been playing with their backup quarterback. They've looked pretty good in the 2 games with him, including versus OU. So them playing UCF is a little concerning, playing them as close as they did. But I think they're going to have the same mindset coming in, that like, oh, we don't have a Big 12 win yet. This is going to be one of our most gettable games from here on out. Like, let's get one this year, and let's put it on these guys. We get to go play West Virginia and Kansas. Like, I don't know if this feels like a desperate team that's going to come in to try and get their first Big 12 win. And that more than anything is what scares me going into this game.
Yeah, I hadn't seen that we were only a 2-point favorite. That is a little bit off-putting, because usually if it's like a toss-up, it's like what, like 3.5, I think.
You get 3 for being at home.
Yeah, you get like 3 for being at home. So and I would expect that, not that we're wildly better than Cincinnati, but we've beaten a couple teams in the Big 12. We beat a team that beat them in the Big 12. Like, we certainly have the stronger track record in the Big 12, but the 2 says that if anything, they think like Cincinnati's marginally stronger. So that is a little bit disconcerting. So, just mostly because anytime I've ever thought that Vegas had one wrong, the game goes in the other direction. So that's not the best.
Not great.
I think that's the thing that scares me, is I guess that, just like defensively, they're as bad a season as they're having, they're clearly a better defensive team than we are. Like, that's not
right.
I don't know how much of that, Scott Satterfield can really take credit for, or if that's just the fact that there's enough Luke Fickell residue left over on this defense that they're, still all right. That's on that side of the ball. They're not a classic Luke Fickell defense by any stretch of the imagination, but they're 59th in the country per SP plus. So, definitely a respectable defense, right in the kind of middle of some of the defenses that Houston has seen in the Big 12. And I mean, they're right in line with some of the defenses that we've seen Houston, go extended periods without scoring points, without scoring offensive touchdowns against. I think they're certainly quality enough to do that. So I think that's where, the scary part comes into play. Offensively, I think it's been pretty lousy, is probably the only way to put it. Transfer quarterback Emory Jones has not looked like someone very capable of throwing an accurate forward pass, but not to bring this guy up for the second, time in this podcast, but we kind of said the same thing about Garrett Green before he went out and threw for a bunch of yards against us. But
yep.
I don't know. I feel like I've seen a little bit more from Emory Jones this year, that I feel a little bit more confident saying that, but I guess you just never know. But certainly I think the thing that can scare you offensively is just that the run game has been successful than the passing game has. Corey Kiner, the running back, just had his 4th 100-yard game of the season against UCF with 114 yards on just 19 carries. Jones, the quarterback, can certainly run the ball himself as well. They got a couple other running backs that are capable as well. So, defensively, they're good enough that you can see them having some success against Houston, just because Houston has been susceptible to at least decent defenses at times. And, offensively, it shouldn't be an offense that should scare you, but this isn't a Cougar defense that you can really assume anything from at this point. So,
Yep.
Even an offense that shouldn't scare you, an average defense is still an offense that might scare Houston, because Houston's not even average. They're 1-0 something in most of the other defensive metrics. So, I don't know. Like the two still feels like it should be 5. And I'm sorry for the Cougar loss on Saturday, because I've just,
Yep. You on
100% guaranteed that they're going to, at least cover. Maybe we'll beat them by 1, but they're going to at least cover the 2. We can assume that. But yeah, I don't know. It's again, Houston has 2 Big 12 wins. Cincinnati doesn't. Great. Houston's 2 Big 12 wins came down to a
Hail Mary.
Came down to a 2-point conversion in overtime. So it's not like Houston has been doing wildly better than Cincinnati here for sure.
Yeah, I think it almost feels like last week, right? Where you're like, this is a game we probably should at least be competitive in, and maybe the favorite to win. You didn't think you were going to be the favorite versus Baylor, but this game you feel like maybe I should be the favorite. Team hasn't looked very good, but it definitely just has that feeling, like I said last week, even though it was wildly wrong, of it's going to be low scoring or very high scoring. Neither defense is going to show up, or neither offense is going to show up. And it's just going to be, what does this actually look like? And then I'm also curious how much Holgorsen puts into it, because we've had the discussion a lot of times where it seems like, a bunch of times we've had this discussion where it seems like he's almost actively trying to lose his job, right? Like he's doing things that just don't quite seem like something you would want your coach to say or do, like punting on an entire recruiting class 3 months before signing day or whatever it is. Like, he's been doing those kind of things, but then when he has his back up against the wall, he seems to pull rabbits out of the hat sometimes. And if he's going to go bowling and possibly keep his job, he's got to win this one. You can't lose this one, because you're not going to, that's not to say you won't beat UCF and you won't beat Oklahoma State, but like, this one really feels like the one he needs to get this team to go bowling is this one right here. And when he has his back up against the wall, the man comes out and he performs. So, we jokingly say that I'm kind of the vibes guy around here, and it just feels like one of those games where Holgorsen's going to have the guys ready to go. Yeah, no, I think at least my read of the situation is kind of the through line on Dana Holgorsen is just like, he's a prideful guy, right? I think he's a little bit too proud to want to waste his time going out and still trying to recruit high school kids and beg high school kids to come play for him at his age. So he's just not going to really try too hard in recruiting. I think he's, when it's a game that he has a lot of pride on the line, like the West Virginia game, he had a lot of pride on the line. The Texas game, he had a lot of pride on the line. He can get the guys up for it. I think we saw the Kansas State just didn't less so in that game. There's if you really coach your butt off, maybe the guys lose 38-14 instead of 41-0 or whatever it was, but he just was like, whatever, it's not worth it. So I agree. I can see where he's like, hey, the end of the season is in sight. They're going to fire me or they're not. But like, I know that getting to 6 games, is going to make me feel better. It's going to be like, hey, if they fire me, they ran me off for bowling in year 1 in a tougher time. It's like those idiots. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't. It's either that or he's going to be real spiteful and just come out flat, and we're just going to finish 4-8, and it's just going to be like, oh, okay, never mind. Yeah, you never know, right? You never know how much to take from a team's effort and put it on the coach versus just like, sometimes the players are not to like go all the Dana route of like, oh, it's not Dana's fault, it's the player's fault, which is, I think, but at the end of the day, you are still dealing with 17 to 22-year-olds. Exactly. Which I think those comments are another way in which it's just his pride getting in his way and being like, hey, I told them to stop committing these stupid penalties, or I told them to stop doing this, whatever. Yeah. It's not on that they didn't do it. But no, it'll be, again, how much credit you give or don't give Dana Holgorsen for the wins or the losses is up to the individual, I think. But, in terms of the narratives, it'll be an interesting result. I think it's kind of a second. I kind of joked up front about, it's not the same as Baylor because they're worse, but which I think is part of why the -2 offends me, right? Is that it looks like a weaker team than Baylor, and this one's at home instead of on the road. It's like, if we just beat a slightly better team than this on the road, why are we only 2-point favorites at home against this? Right.
worse version.
I can really tell that it's bothering you. That's like the third time you've gone back to it. I can really
had
tell.
no idea.
Like,
I had no idea that that
like,
was the
wait a
line. And
minute.
that's just like my brain keeps turning that one over. I'm like, why is the line only 2 points? Yeah, I feel like I had one of the thoughts.
Over under at 55.5 feels low too.
55.5. Well, yeah, no, I think it's hard. I feel like it's hard to know where to put the over under on a game like this one, right? Because it's the classic. I guess it's not the classic. It's a store brand version of the like strength versus strength, weakness versus weakness thing, right? Because Cincinnati's, again, not a great team on either side of the ball, clearly better defensively than offensively.
Right.
Not a great team on either side of the ball, clearly better offensively than defensively. So when you have the weaker, unit going against
God, what is that?
the stronger going
It's
against
so hard to like still hear that like our offense is better than anything, and it's our own defense. It's like, oh God.
So yeah, again, probably misspoken calling it the classic strength versus strength, weakness versus weakness. But it is one of those, and I guess anytime you have one of those, it's hard to know where to put the line. It's hard to know where to put the over. It's hard to know what to expect, and I guess that's kind of where I am. I'd like to think that I can expect Houston to come out and beat a winless, an 0-6 in the Big 12 Cincinnati at home, but I wouldn't want to I wouldn't want to bet a lot of money on that proposition.
Right.
All right. Well, I think we'll go ahead and move from there into our Cougar women's basketball season preview. The women's college basketball season is underway, but the Cougars do not have their season opener until Friday. So we'll talk about them now, and that they are entering season number 10 of the Ronald Hughey era as head coach of the Houston Cougars, as they obviously also enter a new conference in the Big 12. For the last 3 seasons, Houston has been stuck in net rankings purgatory. They've been in the 60s and 70s of the net each of those 3 seasons. Not bad, not a bad team for sure, just not good enough to merit serious NCAA tournament consideration. Last year finished a game below 500 as well, which also would have disqualified them from at-large consideration. And I think as much as the Big 12 move is a part of the narrative for this team, certainly, and for every Cougar team that we talk about this year, I think certainly a big part of the narrative for this team is also, are they ever going to get over the hump with Coach Hughey at the helm? A decade is a long time to try and get your team into the dance. And, heading into the season, I think it's a healthy combination of returning players and holes to replace and some interesting transfers but that kind of feels like it's been the case every year under Coach Hughey, and every year you're like, is this the tournament year? And then you look up and you're, either a couple spots short or several spots short or a couple dozen spots short of making the NCAA tournament. So I don't know, it does feel a bit of like a Groundhog Day type program, Sam, Bobby. So who I didn't accidentally almost call Sam just now. So I don't know.
Didn't almost call me Sam. You definitely called me Sam. I said, but it's okay.
I didn't finish I didn't finish it.
I don't know, man. I don't know about that.
We'll let the listeners decide if I called you Sam or not. But either way, Bobby, a good friend of mine, what are your overview thoughts on the women's basketball program heading into the year?
Yeah, like you said, 10th year of Hughey. It just feels like, honestly, it feels like he probably shouldn't have been back this year. I think all of us, when we heard he was coming back, we're fairly shocked. I don't want to speak for Sam and say that he was fairly shocked, but I do have messages that indicate that he probably was fairly shocked. I think bringing back 4 starters this year for the Cougs, they're bringing back 4 starters. That probably helps him keep his job, right? He gets to go in and go, look, give me one more shot. Let's run it. The problem they're going to run into is this may be a tournament team if they're playing in the American this year, right? But in this tougher schedule, everything that way, you're going to take some losses. You're going to take a decent amount of losses, and you're going to have to finish high enough in the net. Those losses just hurt after a while. And those losses that you're taking to good teams here translate better when you're beating worse teams in the American. So I think while this team, if they were in the American, I think would have a shot at making the tournament, it just doesn't feel like this is going to be their year to get over that hump, even though the net rankings and the RPI that they may have may look decent because it's not going to be too low. When you look at the schedule, there's not a lot of basement teams that you're going to lose to or do anything like that, but you are just going to take some shots, and you're going to have to win some games that you don't expect to win.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, because certainly going from the American to the Big 12 is a big change in what that does for your strength of schedule and what that does for your net ranking as well. And certainly you can say that, hey, like those losses to those teams don't hurt you as bad. But you know, kind of like
losses are losses,
kind of losses are losses. Kind of like we found out last year at the end of the year, you know, even when Houston started winning a bunch of games, it's like, okay, yeah, you can win a bunch of games. Your net ranking is maybe ticking up, but you know, you got to get to 500 too, right? Like that's part of
yeah.
You lose enough Big 12 games, it doesn't matter if they don't hurt you. You got to be 500 on the year. You don't get to go. Or maybe that's just the NIT. But either way, I mean, you're gonna have to win some games. So
Right.
It remains to be seen if Houston can do that against good teams. Looking at this year's team, we'll start with the guards. And you know, you say you're returning 4 of their starting 5, but I think that's maybe a little bit deceptive in that you are losing Tierra Young, 6th player of the year in the American, I believe, this past year, who ended up transferring to SMU, was certainly one of Houston's leading scorers last year, even coming off the bench. Losing her definitely hurts, especially losing her to an in-state rival, albeit one that you are mercifully no longer in a conference with at the very least. But you know, I think the big headliners in terms of the guard group is certainly, the return of Layla Blair and Brittany Onyeje. Blair certainly figures to be the center of attention. She's been a double-digit scorer each of the past 3 years for Houston, increasing her scoring average each season, increasing her assists per game each season as well. Her turnovers did tick up a bit last year. That's certainly an area where I'd love to see her improve. But then her shooting percentage also as well, 36% was right near the team's 36.7%. That was the second worst team shooting percentage in the American. That's something that I think both Blair as an individual and Houston as a team need to do better at, getting high quality shots and making them. And then Onyeje as well, also in her 4th season with the Cougars, also a player who's done some really exciting and impressive things, but also needs to show some improvement, especially in her offensive efficiency. Her scoring has dipped from 10 points a game 3 years ago to 9.4, 2 years ago to 8.8 last year. Last year, her shooting percentage was a career low 30.9%. So, you know, kind of like I said, I think with those two, it's a microcosm of the team, right? They're talented players, likable players I have no trouble cheering for. But I think they and the team as a whole are tasked this year with trying to get significantly more efficient against now, like we said, tougher conference competition.
Yeah, I think the guards are the big thing you see when you go through this team and the lineup and you look at the stats is it just the team can play defense, right? Our guards play amazing defense. They force 24.3 turnovers a game. It's one of the highest in the country. It's such an amazing stat, and the defensive efficiency of this team is just so good. But it just feels like this offense just sometimes is playing with the Kelvin Sampson rim protector on top of it. There's just getting to the hole. You'll see a drive and it just hits the rim and bounces out. This team has to just be more efficient on offense. It's going to hinder this team going forward if the guards cannot just kind of get better in on their shooting percentage. 36.7 from one of your top scorers, just it's not acceptable. It's not anything that's going to help you win games to make the tournament.
Yeah. And in terms of newcomers to the guard group, very frustratingly, Gigi Cook, transfer from Maryland, who looked like maybe the single most exciting newcomer to me, is going to miss the season with an injury. So definitely a disappointment there. The 2 guard transfers who I do believe are available, Enya Boyd, someone who figures to play a key role on this year's team. She's with her 4th college program, starting with North Texas, then Oklahoma State, then UTEP last year, now Houston. Started 11 games a couple years ago for the Cowgirls in the Big 12, was a double-digit scorer with the Miners last year, so certainly someone who can put the ball in the basket. You expect to be part of that rotation in the backcourt. And then Shalexis Aaron as well, another graduate student, also on her 4th program, going from USC to Texas Southern to Oregon State last year. She was a 40% shooter from the floor last year, pretty good 3-point shooter as well. That's certainly something that Houston can use. So, you know, if nothing else, you've got 4 very veteran guards there, and hopefully, you know, that translates to kind of like you said, continued impressive defense and also some more efficient offense.
Yeah, and with the offensive style that Huey runs, you know, just his defensive high pressure, and then he just wants to get out and run. It is a surprise that they don't score as high as they do, but those transfers do look really good. Anytime you can bring in a transfer who helps your weak spot and can come in with a 40% shooting percentage is pretty good. Yeah, especially on a team that can't score.
Right. No, I think I like what you're talking about with the turnovers there, because it's, you know, they force those turnovers largely playing full court defense, something that no one else in the Big 12, I don't believe, really does. So they're going to be kind of an interesting, you know, I think challenge for teams in that way. But kind of what we've seen from that is like when Houston gets points off of turnovers doing full court press, that's great. When Houston doesn't get points off of turnovers, they just don't have a half court offense. I mean, that's kind of, I think the challenge is just, you've got to have something approaching a half court offense for those offensive possessions in which you don't get easy buckets off of turnovers.
Yep.
And then getting into the front court, Houston's long-serving forward Tatiana Hill is gone. Houston's other two primary forwards who played the most minutes last year, Bria Patterson and Cameron Jones, do return, joined by a trio of interesting transfers as well. We'll start with the returners. Patterson, one of those players who just kind of feels like there's always been a positive correlation between her being on the court and things going well. I don't really have the numbers, but my gut says she was probably Houston's leader in plus minus the last couple of years. She does a lot of things well, can score, doesn't turn it over a ton, can rebound, plays defense. I'm grouping her with the forwards here because she's listed as a forward, but was usually, I think last year was starting along kind of at the small forward alongside two other forwards, listed at just 5'11". So, kind of a tweener there. And then Cameron Jones came in as a freshman 3 years ago, looked way too skinny to see the court, but ended up actually doing some nice things in a reserve role already as a true freshman, and has grown into a progressively larger role each of the past 2 seasons. So excited to see, if she's got still maybe another level to take her game to. And then the one player I'm going to throw out here as my pick to click from the returnees who didn't really do a lot last year was Logan McNeil, who scored, I believe, under a point per game last year. But was an elite recruit out of high school, went to LSU, tore her ACL, transferred to Houston after sitting out for a year, and then played in all 31 games last year, but not a ton of minutes. Maybe was not physically quite yet back to 100%, but with a year of college games under her belt, maybe a little bit closer to her physical peak. I'm hopeful that she can show a big sophomore bump and hopefully be a part of this Houston rotation because like I said, even returning a couple starters minus Tatiana Hill, that's a big hole to fill for sure.
Yeah, like you said, the Tatiana Hill hole is going to be a big one to fill. But like you said, the transfers are coming in, and got a lot of faith. I really like Logan McNeil as well. I think the size 6'3", yep. That's a big thing in women's basketball. If you can get somebody playing the 5, playing one of the forward positions, who's got some size to him, that's going to be a big benefit. And like the fact that she's a redshirt sophomore as well, so maybe we see something from her this year. And we kind of see a little bit. We talked about the half court offense, and you have to have something that at least resembles a half court offense. Getting the forwards involved is certainly going to help that.
I was gonna say, any offense, we want the guards to get better, but certainly, it's just kind of assumed, any guard is usually going to shoot a lower percentage on the year than your forwards are going to. So that's certainly a good way to shoot a higher percentage as a team is to get the ball inside and get some easy baskets for your bigs. Mentioned the transfers coming in, a trio of them up front. Malia Johnson scored 8.5 points a game for Pitt last year. Peyton McFarland was a 3-year contributor for Utah before transferring to the Cougs, and Jasira Diawara was a third-team JUCO All-American at Clarendon College, and certainly from some size from those transfers as well. Peyton McFarland from Utah, 6'4", Diawara from JUCO, 6'3", so certainly multiple candidates to kind of move into the 5 spot with Tatiana Hill no longer around. And I like that there's competition in the front court. But other than Patterson, who, like I mentioned, is kind of like not really, maybe plays the 3, maybe not forward, maybe belongs with the guards. I don't know. Other than her, I don't know if there's anyone that I would really super confidently state is going to be an above average Big 12 starter this year. So, I think that's going to be really key for this team, is figuring out if you have, a player or two in the front court ready to take that next step and be, maybe show something a little bit more than what they've shown up until this point. Yeah,
it's like you said, like the competition, but this team really is, and it feels like a show me what you got kind of team. Like, there's a lot of unknowns. Yeah, we have the 4 starters back, and that's really nice. But with this schedule, with this Big 12 schedule, you're going to need your depth, and so it's going to be interesting to kind of see how it plays out this year.
Schedule-wise, kind of a fun mirror of the past season, where Houston played a really tough non-conference strength of schedule and had a really hard time with it before facing a pretty lousy AAC and thriving. This year it's kind of flipped. You're going to play in a really tough conference. But then didn't do really a whole lot to challenge yourself in non-conference schedule. Didn't need to, didn't really, maybe don't need
maybe learn something from last year.
Yeah, for sure. Really only two teams of note in the non-conference schedule: Middle Tennessee, who was number 33 in the net last year, and Washington State, who was number 35. Rice at number 98 is going to be Houston's third toughest non-conference opponents. That kind of tells you where you're at. But then, of course, you go from, a conference where Houston had the third best net ranking at 73 last year, to a conference where 8 of its 10 members last year were in the top 60. So, the good news for Houston in terms of maybe getting some games that they have a better chance of winning is that the Cougs dominated Cincinnati and UCF last year, who are, of course, coming with them, and BYU was pretty bad last year, was a worse team than Houston last year. Also, but yeah, I mean, just looking at this conference, Iowa State and UT Austin were both really strong last year. Expect them to be really good this year. Baylor goes to the tournament every year, often making deep runs. They won their third national title of the century back in 2019. The Sooners have been to the tourney the last couple of years. Kansas went to the tourney and won a game last year. Oklahoma State went to the tourney and does most years. West Virginia was in the tourney and goes more often than that. K-State missed out narrowly, but has gone a bunch recently. Just 8 teams that are on a different level in terms of not only, not having gone in the last 10 years like Houston, but have, they do it pretty regularly. And even BYU and UCF, 2 of the teams that we go, okay, well, Houston should be able to compete against them. Yeah, they both had down years last year. They have both been to the tournament a ton recently and seem unlikely to stay too far down for too long. In terms of teams that just really haven't shown the ability to go to the tournament in recent years, it's in the Big 12. It's Houston, Cincinnati, TCU, and Texas Tech. That's it. The other 10 are all looking like pretty, semi to pretty regular NCAA tournament teams. So don't know exactly how it's going to sort out this year, but kind of like you said, Bobby, it's a lot of tough games. And if Houston is going to, never mind go to the NCAA tournament, but just kind of like, keep their head above water and not get embarrassed in the Big 12, it's going to be, you're going to have to win a lot of games against teams that, you maybe don't look like the favorite for those games.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a prime example of this team is going to need the support from the fan base in home games against teams that they maybe shouldn't win, and try and get a little bit of some home court advantage. I think that's going to be a big deal for the Cougs this year, is playing in a decently packed Fertitta Center, as crazy as it sounds. But yeah, that's kind of my big takeaway, is if the fans may have to will a couple of games into existence for this team.
Absolutely. Would always encourage everyone to make it out to the Fertitta Center, support this team. We'd love, as much as we've sounded maybe a little bit,
down and negative
in the preview, that doesn't mean that we don't love cheering for this team, that we're not, hoping that they have the kind of season that makes us all both feel very silly for doubting them at all in
nothing
in the preseason. And I mean, like I said, they play a full court press. It's a fun style of play to watch when things are going well. It's just a ton of fun. So certainly pulling for Coach Huey and all those young ladies to have the best season. They'll be opening the season this week, hosting a pair of games. They'll be hosting Air Force on Friday. They'll be hosting Sam Houston on Tuesday. From what I said about the overall strength of the non-conference schedule, you can probably guess that these teams aren't great. Air Force was 179 in the net last year. Sam Houston 215. So definitely a couple of games that if you are looking to, Coach, like I said, Coach Huey's confident. He's always confident, and I love that. He's talking about
absolutely.
What was his quote? Was hey, warning to everyone, like we eat what we kill in the Big 12. So I love it. But it's going to be we'll see what happens this year. But certainly, if you're going to justify that kind of confidence, Air Force and Sam Houston need to be a couple of comfortable wins, hopefully.
Yeah, they need to be a lot like a team that played earlier this week.
I mean, I don't need any 53-point win, but give me like a 20-point win. Give me a couple of 20-point wins.
I need it to not be close.
High teens at least, right? I want to be not sweating this one out for the final 10 minutes, and we'll be fine.
Absolutely.
We'll go from there. So best of luck to the Cougs. We'll see what happens with the season starting on Friday. Moving on to a team that is in the middle of its season, Cougar Volleyball had an exciting week, winning a pair of matches against the Golden Knights of Central Florida, extending their winning streak to 5 matches with a 3-set sweep on Friday and a 3-1 win on Saturday. And this was a UCF team we expected to play Houston pretty close. So that Friday result was really pleasantly surprising for me. The middle set was a narrow Houston win, basically what we expected. But the first and the third sets were dominated by Houston. They won the first one 25-15. They won the third one 25-19. That may not sound like a lot, but this one was 23,
not even close.
23-12 Houston before UCF put on a late rally just to make it look a little bit closer when it was already well out of hand. And the big thing in this match was the offense, namely that UCF just absolutely couldn't stop Houston's. The Cougars hit a crazy 370 as a team in this one. For reference, Stanford currently leads the country, hitting 314 as a team on the year. Another way to put it, Houston had 48 kills and 100 attacking attempts. So basically, half of the time Houston hit it over the net, it went for a kill. So that's a pretty good stat, and was indicative of, like we said, just UCF, a team that was like what 8-3 in the Big 12 play coming into this one, just putting up very little resistance to Houston on Friday.
Yeah, and that Friday game, like you said, it wasn't as close as the score indicated. That first set, the Cougs just absolutely dominated them. It was almost kind of boring to watch. You know, you kind of look down at your phone and you look back up at the ESPN Plus stream, and you're just like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'll watch the next set completely. And so it was very much a good one to watch. And you know, coming into the weekend, a nice little riding the streak after playing all the tough teams in the conference. It feels nice to win a game against a game that may be close, and a team that you know split with the last 2 years, right? You split with them the last 2 years. To come out and just absolutely dominate them is absolutely beautiful.
And then on Saturday, things got a little bit scary out of the gates. UCF came out playing much better defensively, especially in the first set, jumped out to a big lead, ended up winning the first set 25-20. And very notably, Houston coming into this one was 0-6 on the year when they lose the first set of the match. Kind of like you said, they had split each of the last 2 seasons. They had split the last 2 matches in the Fertitta Center. They were 14-14 against each other all time coming in. Houston was 5-5 in the Big 12 coming in. So just it felt like everything was pointing all of a sudden, despite Houston's dominance on Friday, to the 2 teams splitting the 2 matches. But that's not the way it turned out, as Houston's defense showed up in a big way in set 2. As this time it was Houston who jumped out to a big lead in the set and held off UCF 25-18 to tie it up. And then after the intermission, Houston got things refigured out offensively. We saw more of the dominant Cougar offense that we had seen on Friday. They hit 333 and 481 in the final 2 sets, respectively, winning those sets 25-15 and 25-11 in an emphatic 4th and final set to finish the 2-match sweep of UCF. Both Abby Jackson and Kenneth Sauer had double-doubles in this one. Both Morgan Yonda and Andy Cook had 20 assists. Yeah, really, I mean, other than dropping the first set, just really an all-around impressive performance from Houston in this match and the weekend as a whole, for sure.
Yeah, and it even got Rachel Tullis Big 12 Conference Defensive Player of the Week. So with 11 blocks on the weekend. So great defensive performance from the Cougs, but also great offensive performance. I mean, can you ask for much more out of that Saturday match? I mean, you lose the first set, maybe you come out a little cold, and maybe they were watching Cougar football early. I don't know. But yeah, they come out a little slow, but then if you're going to come out slow, you run the next 3 and you just absolutely dominate it. Looks good.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the defense, because I'd kind of been leading with the offense because of the crazy numbers they were putting up. But I mean, this was a UCF team that we looked at the numbers, and they were a very offense-first team coming in. And the Cougar defense definitely did a great job of not letting them ever stay competitive in these matches. Looking at the Big 12 race, really an interesting group of standings. The 3 teams that gave Houston their 5 losses are right at the top of the pile. The Longhorns are 13-0. BYU and Kansas are fighting for second place behind them. And then after that, there are 4 teams with 5 losses. Baylor and UCF are 8-5. Houston and Iowa State are 7-5. And it certainly seems like the Cougars have a great chance to move up this week, because Iowa State is playing Kansas twice, and UCF is facing BYU twice. While Houston goes on the road to face Oklahoma on Thursday and Friday. You may have noticed I did not mention the Sooners in my recap of the top of the Big 12 standings. That's because they are 2-10 in Big 12 play. They got dominated in 2 matches by UCF back in September, the same UCF team that Houston just pretty soundly beat. I will say, I think it's notable, their last 2 matches were a 3-0 sweep victory at Iowa State, who's a pretty good player. and a 3-2 loss at Baylor, where they took a solid Bears team to 5 sets before losing in Waco. So, like I said, those are two teams that are right in Houston's the little 5-loss grouping there in the Big 12 standings. So, you expect this will be a Sooner team that is not scared of the Houston Cougars, just because they're gonna come into this one with a significantly superior Big 12 record. The Sooners are also hitting a pretty respectable 249 as a team. So certainly this is going to be a team that Houston, I think, has to take seriously. But they're 2-10. They're 2-10 in the Big 12. They're not great defensively. Houston just looked amazing offensively this past weekend. So you're certainly hoping that offense travels, and that these are two matches that it feels like Houston should be able to take.
Yeah, definitely. It feels like one of those where you don't take it very serious like you should, and you drop a set. Maybe you drop 2 in a match, but you end up winning in 5, and you win that 5th set emphatically or something like that in one of these matches. Hopefully it's if you're going to do that, do it in the early match and kind of wake yourself up for the rest of it. But yeah, when you have a number by your name, you should probably be winning games like this.
All right. And speaking of a team with a number next to their name, the Cougar men's hoops team got their season underway this past week, this past Monday, in fact, smothering Louisiana Monroe 84-31. It almost doesn't feel like a real score to say it out loud. What a start to the season. Fewest points allowed by Houston in a game since 1951, tied for the 3rd fewest points allowed in a game in school history. And, more up top, we'll go ahead and say, I think it's certainly fair when talking about this game to remember and point out that Louisiana Monroe looks to be the worst team on Houston's schedule this year. But man, I don't care who you're facing. Holding a D1 team to 31 points in 40 minutes is impressive. Damian Dunn, also very impressive, introduced himself to the Cougar fan base in a big way, scoring 14 points in about 15 seconds in the first half, ended up with 18. Emmanuel Sharp was real strong as well, was firing from deep, ended up with 20 points on 4 3-pointers, I believe, in this one. So, like I said, it's the classic. You can only take so much from playing Louisiana Monroe, but in terms of what you do facing Louisiana Monroe, it's hard to do much better than 84-31.
Yeah, you can't ask for more than outscoring the team's full output at halftime. If literally we didn't come out and score a point in the second half, we would have won this game by 7 when you really break it down like that. And like you said, they may be the worst team on our schedule, but good teams dominate the worst teams on their schedule and win by 25 and 30, not 53.
Yeah. And really, just like I said, I mentioned Sharp and Dunn, but you have to kind of like what you saw from everybody. Wani and Javier looked like dominant forces up front that we wanted them to be. I was excited to finally get a look at Malik Wilson. Remember the 2-time transfer who came over from Texas Tech a year ago and then missed all of last season with an injury, actually entered the transfer portal and then back out of the transfer portal to come back to Houston here for his final year of eligibility. Looked like a world-class havoc creator on defense with, certainly jobs with him. I think coming to Houston from Texas Tech, and looked like he's going to be kind of the 3rd point guard on the roster, in addition to Jamal Shedd obviously being the starter, and then LJ Cryer being kind of the combo shooting guard, do some point guard duties sometimes. Looks like Malik Wilson is going to be kind of the 3rd guy with point guard duties. And I liked what we saw from him. Again, it's only one data point, but thought he was pretty strong. So like I said, 84-31 again, when you look that well. And LJ Cryer, the guy you probably figure is going to be your leading scorer on the year, was like 3 for 13 or something, and didn't even, it's going to probably
only put up 9.
We'll probably have one of his worst games of the season, and it didn't matter because you still won by 53.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my wife and I, we were at the Bruins versus Stars game while this game was going on. She's a big Bruins fan. I like the Stars. We do it every year, right? But we're at the game and I'm like, she's like, "Oh, when does basketball start?" on the way there. And I was like, tonight. And so I'm like, I pull it up. I'm like, oh, I get the ESPN notification that the game starts, and I'm kind of checking it very not regularly, right? When something happens, I may pull it up, a stoppage in play or something. I pull it up and I see the halftime score, and excuse me, and I was like, we're up 24 at the half. And she was like, okay. And I was like, yeah, I knew we'd win. I didn't think we'd be up 24 at the half. And then like you're randomly checking it and it's like 69-19, and you're just like, wait a minute. It was one of those moments where you like keep checking game tracker and you're just like, you're like going to the box score, adding it up. You're like, surely somebody has a typo in here. We're not up 50, right? And yeah, we were up 50. So really fun to kind of watch it that way when you're not really checking and you're just like, oh yeah, we're dominating, no big deal. And then you pull it up and you're like, oh no, we're really dominating. Like we're up 45.
Yeah. Yeah, there are different like levels of domination, and this was not your just like run of the mill domination. This was some next level stuff. Well, like I said, according to Ken Palm, that's your worst team on the schedule, so it gets maybe a little bit tougher for the rest of the way. Doesn't get a whole lot tougher this coming week as Houston hosts Texas A&M Corpus Christi on Saturday, and then Stetson on Monday. The Islanders went 24-11 last year. They did win the Southland Conference regular season title and the Southland Conference tournament. They went to March Madness, beat Southeast Missouri State in the first 4 game before losing by 21 to 1 seed Alabama in the NCAA tournament. They were actually picked to finish 4th in the Southland this year, despite winning both titles last year, and largely because it looks like they don't return any of their top 6 scorers from last year. So I think that's probably where that comes from. And then they opened their season by playing a non-Division I team in their first game, so probably not a lot to glean from that, other than, I don't know, man. If I was going to play Houston in my second game of the year, I might not play a non-D1 team in game 1. That's a slight upgrade in difficulty level.
Yeah, I don't have many thoughts on it, but you said played a non-D1 team and won. This is just where I wanted to mention that SMU played an NAIA school and only won by 19, and we took a D1 school and beat it by 53. So not that we ever have to worry about SMU much anymore, but it is nice to watch them only win by 19 versus Southwest Assemblies of God.
They were struggling with Southwest Assemblies of God for a little while there. The 19 was not even indicative of that one.
Things you love to see. So sorry to bring SMU into this U of H pod. No, this is very much a game that you hope you don't expect to win by 53, but you do hope that you have that 19-20 point win there.
Man, you want to bring some bad juju into the podcast. Houston is 4-1 all time against A&M Corpus, and yours truly was there for the one loss.
Oh, nice.
An overtime loss down in Corpus in the 2010-11 season that I think Sam was there. I wish Sam was here so I could ask him. I think we both went to that one together. And then
why did I not go to that game? 2010, 2011.
Why did you not? Why did anyone go to that game?
Yeah, fair point. What a stupid thing for me to ask.
You're looking at the
God, we were sick in college. We had a sickness, buddy.
I still do, but you know what?
That's why we're doing this podcast once a week.
I just go to Waco to watch this Cougar football team play, for crying out loud.
Correct.
I'm glad I did. Anyway, it could be worse. You could be a fan of the Stetson Hatters men's basketball program, which has been playing Division I basketball since 1972 and has never made the NCAA tournament. They won 7.
Great name, though. Great name.
Stetson Hatters is a fantastic name.
Sorry.
No, it is. It's one of the better Division I mascots. I'm glad you called attention to it, because I did not have a bullet point in my notes to circle to like make a point of that, and I should have. They won 17 games last year, the most wins that they've had in a season since the 2000-2001 season. Incidentally, that was also the last season in which their home, currently known as the Atlantic Sun Conference, that was their last season when it was still known as the Trans-America Athletic Conference, the TAAC. The 12-6 mark that Stetson had in Atlantic Sun play a year ago was also their best conference record since 86-87, their first full season in the TAAC, their first full season in any conference, when they went 13-5. They were picked 3rd in the preseason coaches poll, but 6th in the preseason media poll, which the Atlantic Sun, I think it's fun, it has both a coaches and a media poll, so that's fun. So don't know what the coaches know that the media members don't, but maybe that's a little bit tougher team. But I think important to put it into perspective, even last year, probably their best season in school history. They were still 172 in Ken Palm. They played 4 games against top 100 teams. They lost to Florida by 38, to Charleston by 5, to UCF by 15, and to Liberty by 29. So not really the profile of a team you'd expect to give Houston a hard time. I will say, last year, number 41 offense, according to Ken Palm in the country, number 333 defense. Oh. So could make for a fun matchup, I guess, if hopefully not a close one.
Oh my God. 331. How many teams are in
333. It is down this year from 363 to 362, since I believe 2 teams dropped and 1 went up or something like that. I'm pretty sure.
You shouldn't be 300th in anything.
No, but I mean, somebody has to be. And I guess when you're a team that is Stetson University and they've never been to the tournament, you get to be. I mean, it's honestly more amazing that they were 41 offensively than it is that they were.
That's incredible too. Yeah, it's gonna be a hopefully not a close game, but one where maybe you look down and their offensive efficiency is coming through, and the game early is like 10-9, and you're like, oh, check this out. And
that's it. They'll score more than 31 points. That's my
yeah. yeah. Where it's closer than you think for like the first 5 minutes of the game, and you're kind of like, what is happening right now? And then you continue to watch, and then it just feels like oh, look, we're up 20. Like, you didn't even think about it. So yeah, probably going to score more than 31 there.
Do you know where Stetson University is located, Bobby?
It is in DeLand, Florida.
Is in DeLand, Florida. Very nice.
So do you know why I know that? Funny story.
Why do you know that?
All my family lives in Florida, Kissimmee, Orlando, and then in like the Tampa-ish area. Mm-hmm. And we went for a family wedding, like my great-grandparents, like 50th, 60th wedding anniversary, I can't remember. And we're pulling up to the venue, and it's like, turn right here for Stetson University. And I was like, what? I didn't know this is where Stetson was, but Stetson's here. Yeah. And that's when I learned that the Hatters and unfortunately it was a Saturday. So like the whole bookstore and everything was closed had we not been going to that event, but I would have driven back to try and get a Hatters something, but yeah, couldn't pull that off.
Yeah. So like our friends at A&M Corpus, they opened the season with a non-Division I opponent in Trinity Baptist College, so not going to take a whole lot away from their 109-54 victory in that one. They'll be going to see Sam out in Vegas playing UNLV on Saturday, and then just one travel day before coming all the way back to Houston to.
It's going to be a tough one for them.
Yeah, I imagine it. I sure hope it'll be a tough one for them. If they're doing real well in that, that'll be more than a little bit concerning.
Correct.
All right, so before we leave real quick, since this episode hasn't taken too long, we are going to talk a little bit of Big 12 football, which finds itself in a really intriguing place. We're not going to do kind of our typical game-by-game recap and preview. I did want to at least briefly mention, though, although Houston will not be participating in the Big 12 title race, there are fully 7 teams very much in this. UT Austin and Oklahoma State are currently 5-1. In the Big 12, while 5 more teams, Kansas, Oklahoma, Kansas State, West Virginia, Iowa State, find themselves just a game out of first place at 4-2. So I am kind of excited, if nothing else. Before the season, we're talking about, the Big 12, and it's just going to be this crazy competitive conference. And then for a minute there, it certainly looked like the 2 departing teams were maybe just going to be kind of like head and shoulders above everybody else. So I think it's been kind of delightful, if nothing else, seeing that, like, oh, no. There are enough other teams here that they could drag those 2 teams down into the mire and just make it a conference race where you genuinely, there are 7 teams here, with 3 games to play that are very much in the title race. So,
this is the excitement we wanted heading into the season. Like you said, we were all just kind of like, all right, it's gonna be Texas OU. Let's see what happens. But the beauty of this conference is that anyone can win it at any time. And when we were, even during expansion talk, we were like, well, does this make it where any team, like, with the invite of Colorado, you were like, is this really where any team can win any week? This was before we really saw what Dion was doing. And now I'd say Dion brings into the conference this idea of like, oh, maybe anyone could win any week. So it's really exciting to be in a conference like this rather than what we were in before, where you had games against people that you were just kind of like, I mean, cool, we're playing Temple, like Temple didn't have a shot. I'm not saying that like us or UCF or Cincy have a shot, but 7 teams going for the conference championship is a ton of fun.
Some interesting games that kind of helped shape the title race this past week. Kansas State dropping a heartbreaker in overtime to the Longhorns game. When it went to overtime, Texas goes first and kicks the field goal. Kansas State has 4th and goal from the 4, and instead of kicking the field goal to go to second overtime, decides to go for the touchdown and win. A big question. I like the 2-point conversion we had against Baylor. I don't know if 4th and goal from the 4 Man, that sure feels like kick a field goal and keep going territory. Ended up being
Yeah, especially against like a top
Howard
10 team,
yeah.
the conference leader, like somebody who if you win that game, you are in the driver's seat to go to be in Arlington to face them again.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was kind of weird. Then you saw, Bedlam, which is just a wild game that the Oklahoma State was able to hold off the Sooners 27-24. So I you saw both, like I said, had both of the departing teams get taken down to the wire. One wins and one loses, but it kind of, like I said, it speaks to the overall concept of neither of them really getting to run away from the rest of the conference. Certainly an interesting game, and I hate to mention it, but Kansas and Iowa State. I mean, the Jayhawks. The question has always been for them all year, are they going to be able to do enough offensively without Jalen Daniels? And he just never seems like he's going to come back, but they keep doing enough offensively. And then one of their better defensive games of the year held Iowa State to 3 points in the first half. And really they only got to 21 kind of at the end when it looked like maybe it was already out of reach there. So, and then West Virginia kind of, as much as they are, down on their coach, they dominated BYU, and all of a sudden you look up and they're 6-3, 4-2, and still technically, I guess, at least in the Big 12 race. So just, like I said, you love having lots of games to bounce around on Saturday, and I know that there's a lot of teams alive in the title race.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about how Oklahoma State for most of the season was just absolute dog shit. And now they're number 15 in the country and they just won Bedlam. Like this conference went from kind of boring to really exciting over about a 2-week period. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah, you want to talk about some interesting lines for the coming week. Two of these teams that are right involved in that title race facing two teams that are very much not involved in the title race and very much not having a good time this year. And you've got some really close lines anyway. Kansas only a 3.5 point at home, favorite at home against Texas Tech. Oklahoma State just a 2.5 point on the road in Orlando to face UCF. Kansas big favorites at home against Baylor. No surprise there. West Virginia, Oklahoma, it's in Norman. The Sooners favored by a couple touchdowns. You figure that one probably goes Oklahoma's way, but I mean, heck yeah, I guess they're both 4-2. You never know at this point, I guess. And then Texas big 10-point favorites at TCU. And then Iowa State, BYU in the nightcap out in Provo. The Cyclones favored by 7.5, trying to very much stay in that race at 4-2 right now. So kind of another week of just a lot of games that are going to impact this title race, and a lot of games that I think Vegas is rightly kind of throwing up its hands and going, yeah, these even if they seem like they shouldn't be close, they probably will be.
Yeah, and kind of the funny thing when you mentioned the Big 12 race and these games that are playing some roles, like Iowa State, BYU. Iowa State's still in it, but BYU's not. They're fighting for bowl eligibility, but they're not necessarily in the Big 12 fight. So you have games where one team is in the Big 12 fight and the other team's not. Right? Texas, TCU's 2-4. The West Virginia OU game being the exception, but you got Oak State 5-1 versus UCF 1-5 in conference. K-State, Baylor 4-2. K-State 2-4. Baylor. Kansas, Texas Tech. Kansas, if Kansas loses another game, they're out, right? So every game is a playoff game to Kansas at this point, and they need some help. But Tech being 3-3, they're out of it. The only game that isn't really kind of like that is going to be that West Virginia Oklahoma game. But then you also have our game where, yeah.
I was gonna say there's one game that's not like it, in the sense that neither team is even remotely competing for
remotely close to this. So yeah.
Yeah, we're the one guys. We're the one game.
Is it me?
Yeah.
Is it me? So
the one game out of 7 on Saturday that will have absolutely no Big 12 title race implications whatsoever. But what are you gonna do?
That's how it goes.
All right. Well, I think what we are going to do is we're going to go ahead and wrap the episode there on our way out. As always, want to say a big thank you to our Scott and Holman podcast Patreon supporters, my absolute favorite people on the planet. Don't tell
the best
my family or loved ones that. It's you guys. I appreciate so much that you are listening to this free podcast every week and saying, you know what, I enjoy this enough that I feel like this is worth putting a couple bucks behind. So if that sounds like you want to sign up for the Scott and Holman podcast, you want to give us your $5 a month to let us know that you appreciate the work that we put in. We would
or
love
more, or more,
or more. Yeah,
or more.
We have
Or
that's
more.
even more remarkable to me is we got the Patreon supporters that are putting in more than the $5. So very, very much appreciated all around. So any money amount, $5 on up will get you that access to our bonus content that we're putting out regularly, as well as just being overall good for your karma. I'm pretty sure to give money to the one podcast. I think that is definitely true. So I'm gonna go ahead and say it.
I haven't heard it isn't.
Yeah, I mean, I defy anyone to prove that that's not true. I would love for you, the listener, to also get in contact with us if you'd like. You can email us, shpodcast@gmail.com. You can tweet at us at shpodcast. You can skeet at us on Blue Sky.
I really don't like that. I really.
Podcast.bsky.social. So that's the awkward way we're going to end this one. If you made it all the way to the end, you're an absolute rock star. And as always,
Go Cougs.